noises in the winter's night awoke the owner of the old pub. He sat up with a groan. An icy breeze rattled his bedroom windows, and from the city outside, distant sirens wailed. Stifling a yawn, the middle-aged man reached for his bedside table to pick up his glasses, then switched on the police scanner he kept there. And what he heard on the encrypted channel was unexpected. But what shocked him into full awareness was the noise he heard next. Something was rattling downstairs. The front door of the pub. Someone was trying to get it open.
"If those wannabe gangster kiddos think they can break into my place,"
the barkeep grumbled, flinging back the covers and standing,
"they've got another thing coming for them."
Sliding his cold feet into slippers, he grabbed the loaded shotgun beside his bedroom door and moved as quickly and quietly as he could across the hall and down the stairs to the pub. The soft glow of the streetlights shone through the frosted windows, and the string of Christmas lights above the bar twinkled green, orange, and red. The barkeep squinted down the barrel of his shotgun at the front door when it was wrenched suddenly open from the outside, screws falling from the broken handle. Swirls of windswept snowflakes streamed inside.
"The pub's closed, you muppets. You all got one chance to run along. I advise you to take it."
Outside, in the blustery night, the shadows moved and one figure came forward.
"Don't do it. You hear all those sirens? The city is one big disaster zone tonight. Think about how long it'll take an ambulance to make its way here to Little Dublin if you're bleeding out in the street."
The figure outside bent to fit its impossibly large form through the doorway. Coming to a stop inside the pub, it stretched upright, a monstrous silhouette with a huge head, almost reaching the ceiling beams. Then another figure crept inside, and then another. The three men stood there in a line amidst the tables, icy air blowing in around them. Behind his shotgun, the pub owner held his breath. Shifting a few feet to his right, he elbowed a switch on the wall, and lights flickered on behind the bar. Blinking in the glare, he stared down the barrel at the trio of unexpected midnight visitors. And what a trio they were. Two of them were dressed in orange jumpsuits, and the other in a torn straitjacket. All three had multiple bloody wounds. The man on the left was young, tall, and wiry, with dark hair and dark eyes, and many scars on his hollow face. The man on the right was very old and short and fat, with a shiny bald head, beady eyes, and a curly white beard streaked down the front with dried blood. He was the one in the straitjacket. And the man in the center, the one who had broken the door and now stood towering over the two, he was a mountain of muscle, with hulking hands and a ginger beard and hair. His face was wide and wrinkled, like a pale gorilla, and his eyes were blue and sharp.
"Well then, you three aren't exactly the street punks I was expecting. Can you at least shut the door? I'm freezing my bullocks off."
The giant man in the middle turned, reached outside, and swung the door closed, gently shoving it in place on its damaged hinges.
"That's better. So, 3 serial killers walk into a bar, into my bar, in the dead of night. It's like the start of a bad joke."
He lowered the shotgun a few inches, though he kept his finger on the trigger as he looked over the intruders one by one.
"Your reputations precede you, gentlemen. The twisted trinity of All Saints Chapel. The 3 most feared and hated men in this old city of sinners."
The 3 killers were silent, staring back at him. The barkeep aimed his gun at the old man with the bloody beard.
"First, there's the infamous Nicky Scarpinato, a.k.a. the Christmas Cannibal."
Next, he aimed at the wiry young man.
"And then we have the current celebrity, Mr. Jasper David Wraith himself, the Sundown Slasher. Finally,"
he aimed, but only with his eyes, at the ginger giant.
"there's the handsome fella, big trouble in Little Dublin himself, Dermit McMurrough."
The barkeep lowered his shotgun and smiled.
"Sup, Derm? Come by for that pint, did ya?"
Dermit Smasher McMurrough marched forward, all 8 feet 10 inches of him, bent down, wrapped his arms around the barkeep, and lifted him right out of his slippers in a back-cracking hug.
"Oh there! I missed you too, man, but my back is fragile these days. Lord knows I'm over the hill and tumbling down the other side fast."
Dermit lowered his old friend back to the floor, his blue eyes twinkling.
It's good to see you two. Though I gotta say,
The barkeep glanced around at the other two.
Not sure I approve of your friends these days. Kinda seems like a rough crowd.
Across the bar, the other two notorious killers appeared decidedly anxious. Jasper David Wraith's eyes were darting left and right, no doubt assessing what he might use as a weapon.
You can relax, Mr. Wraith. You came with Dermit, so you're safe here. For the time being, anyway.
Turning, he leaned the shotgun upright behind the bar, then held up his empty hands.
They call me Young Fitz. I know. It's a bit silly these days, but old Fitz was me dad. May he rest in peace. And I'll always be Young Fitz to the people of this borough. Now then, pull up some stools, will ya? You all look like you could use a drink. And I know I certainly could.
In his mind, Jasper David Wraith was still fighting, and in more ways than one. He was battling against the many pains in his body, especially his left arm, where a bullet had blasted through muscle and bone, just above the elbow. The injury was sending jolts of pain up into his shoulder and back, and making his fingers numb. He was fighting the call of sleep, refusing to show any sign of fatigue. Truth be told, the battle he had waged in the halls of All Saints Federal Prison only hours before had left Jasper winded, and he was battling the desire to slip back into the glorious memory of that slaughter. After 2 years of captivity, he had broken free from his chains, armed himself with iron and steel, and struck down many in his righteous fury. He could still hear it in his mind, the delicious sound of his blades chopping through flesh, of warm blood splattering across brick walls, and bodies thudding to the concrete floor. Shaking himself from these musings, Jasper looked around the pub. The two killers who had shared his cell in All Saints were sitting on stools at the bar. The towering smasher, Dermit McMurrough, and the cackling cannibal Santa Claus, Nicky Scarpinato. They had proven useful in the escape, sure, but now they would probably just slow him down. Jasper felt the urge to lunge for that shotgun behind the bar and kill them now, along with the old bartender. Maybe then he could rest a little, clear his head, and figure out his next step. Their host, this young Fitz character, filled 2 glasses of dark beer from a tap and handed them to Smasher and Nicky, then looked up at Jasper.
Not a beer drinker, Mr. Wraith.
Jasper stared at him, then slowly shook his head.
What's your order then? Something festive. Hot cocoa with a candy cane, perhaps. Do you have Diet Pepsi?
Fitz cracked a smile and leaned down to a fridge under the bar.
Let's see. I got Coke Zero. Would that be all right? I guess.
Fitz added ice cubes to a glass, poured in half the Coke, and set both glass and can onto the bar. Jasper exhaled and climbed onto his stool, trying not to wince as he set his left hand in his lap. Fitz poured himself a beer and took a long chug.
Right then,
he said, wiping foam from his mustache and adjusting his glasses.
Here's what I know. Earlier this evening, or to be more accurate, yesterday evening, all hell broke out over at the football stadium. Some sort of bomb scare, which I'm guessing was just a distraction to keep the cops busy, because the real shit was going down over at All Saints. From what I heard over the scanner, all-out war erupted in All Saints. I figured it was just the gangs up to their usual infighting, not some elaborate escape plan. But here we are.
Hunched on his stool, Smasher set down his glass, now empty, and grunted. Fitz looked at him, and as Jasper watched, the enigmatic giant tilted his head side to side, his eyelids twitching, shoulders shrugging, throat grumbling.
Uh-huh,
said the barkeep, nodding along.
I see. I'm amazed you three made it through all that and out in one piece.
Jasper cocked an eyebrow, wondering what exactly the man could learn from watching Smasher's meaningless gestures.
And this, vehicle you took here, it wasn't a cop car, was it? Nothing with a tracker?
No,
answered Jasper.
We parked in the alley.
But Fitz was still looking at Smasher, who again flinched and grumbled.
The driver is tied up in the trunk? What the hell for?
At this, Jasper sat up, sneering.
The driver is none of your concern,
he said sternly.
I will deal with him.
Now Fitz did look over Jasper, and so did Smasher. Only Nicky seemed unconcerned by the whole ordeal. The creepy little weirdo was hiccuping with glee as he took little sips of his beer, like a kid, excited at being given an adult beverage. Never mind that Nicky was about 100 years old.
You brought yourself your troubles to my pub, Mr. Wraith,
said Fitz.
That makes it my concern. And from what Dermit has told me, you three are now top of the hit list for the feds, the city police, and a dozen very dangerous gangs. That's a whole lot of trouble.
Jasper wrinkled his upper lip.
What do you mean? What Dermit told you? Smasher hasn't said anything. He pretty much never does.
Sure he does,
said Fitz, raising his glass to take another long sip.
Dermit and I go way back. We're like brothers.
As soon as he said these words, a look of regret passed over his face.
Sorry, Derm. Didn't mean it like that.
Smasher shrugged one giant shoulder and slid his empty glass across the bar. Fitz took it and refilled it at the tap.
I don't think the cops have made it public that any prisoners escaped the compound,
he went on, addressing all three of them.
No doubt they're scared shitless of the public's reaction. But rest assured, the news will leak by morning, and any location associated with you three will be crawling with cops, crooks, and media, so you certainly can't stay here.
Nicky set down his glass, belched loudly, and giggled.
There'll be an APB out for your getaway car, so that'll need to be stowed away ASAP. I've got a garage nearby. Then in the morning, I'll have some friends come by and scrap it. By then, you'll need to be on your way. That means you too, I'm afraid,
he added, looking at Smasher, whose expression darkened. Jasper looked up at the barkeep.
I need a car,
he said, putting all the conviction he could into his voice, though Fitz looked unfazed.
No, son. You need a couple dozen stitches, some extra strength Advil, and a few hours sleep. That's what I'll offer you, free of charge. But then you're gone. You got it?
Jasper stared into the bubbles rising in his Coke Zero, his mouth a tight line, and said nothing. Finishing his beer, Fitz clapped his thigh and straightened up.
Right. I've got a first aid kit somewhere around here. I'm gonna take a leak, find that, and then play doctor.
He turned to go, then spun back and reached for his shotgun.
And I'll take that, thank you very much.
Jasper watched as the barkeep disappeared into a hallway in the back, and from the corner of his vision, he saw Smasher sigh and glance around the room. As soon as he was sure no eyes were on him, Jasper moved. In one swift and silent motion, he reached across the bar, snatched up a short kitchen knife that sat beside some limes on a cutting board, and pulling back his hand, stowed the weapon out of sight beneath the sleeve of his prison jumpsuit. Jasper felt much better with the cold metal against his skin, much safer, much more ready to face whatever came next. Dermit felt his ribs creak with each breath. His whole body ached, a half-ton of sore muscles and straining bones, and the 2 pints in his stomach didn't help his mood as much as he had hoped. Setting down the glass, he laid his right hand on the bar and examined it in the light. It was a lethal weapon, that hand, each meaty finger like a sledgehammer when he needed it to be. And yet, his joints were so sore and swollen, and his skin still bore the red stains of battle. He closed his eyes. After decades of peace, he had done it again. He had seized a man's head in his hand and squeezed it, smashing it into ground meat and shattered bits of bone. He sighed, the noise, like the wind outside, cold and hollow and full of regret. Opening his eyes, he glanced over at Nicky and saw that his cellmate of the past quarter century was tipping sideways on his stool, his eyelids fluttering sleepily. Turning and holding out his hand, Dermit caught the old man just before he toppled to the floor. Bending with a groan, Dermit lifted Nicky into his arms and carried him to a padded bench in the corner of the pub. There were 2 folded blankets there. Dermit laid him gently on the cushion, using one blanket as a pillow and tucking the other around the short-limbed, round-bellied fugitive. Nicky began to snore. Dermit straightened up, his spine popping, and looked out the frosted windows. The Ballygub pub was just across the road from the bay, and through the snow in the air, he could just make out the red and blue glimmer of police cars on the other side, their lights reflected weakly in the chilly water below. Sniffling, Dermit looked around the old pub, surprised by how little it had changed since he'd been locked up. Of course, like himself, it did have its signs of wear and tear. New stains on the hardwood floor, cobwebs above the dartboard, cracks in 2 of the windows. His stomach growled, and he headed to the bar to look for some pretzels or something, when the framed photographs along the far wall caught his eye, and he went there first. Crossing his arms to hug his massive hands around his torso, Dermit leaned and squinted at the photos, wishing he had his reading glasses. Some had been taken in the pub or out front, on birthdays and holidays and run-of-the-mill normal days. Others showed various spots around the borough: the steps of St. Halvard's Cathedral, the club, the docks. And the people in these photos, all those faces, Dermit remembered many of them, some warmly, others he had crushed in his fists on that fateful day when he had given in to his wrath and brought down a criminal empire with his bare hands. His gaze flicked to a Polaroid of a few laughing young men, pints in hand. Young Fitz was there, in his newsboy cap, and Dermit himself. Though the top half of his face was out of frame, that tended to happen. And then there was...
Feels like a whole other life, doesn't it?
Mumbled Fitz's voice. Dermit turned to look at his old friend. Fitz was holding a bundle of folded clothes under one arm and a first aid kit in the other. Dermit nodded. Raising a giant finger, he pointed at a photo of a smiling wedding party. Dermit didn't recognize the bride, but the groom was young Fitz.
Ah yes, my jolly nuptials. Sorry you couldn't be there, Derm. I actually sent you a copy of this pic, but I'm guessing the prison never passed along any of my letters.
Dermit shook his head.
Bastards. Anyway, the marriage didn't work out. But we got a beautiful boy out of it, Brian. And he's got a baby of his own now, if you can believe it. Darling little Gracie. This pic here was the day she was born. God, look at that little angel. I gotta update these pics. Gracie's 3 now. Growing so fast. I babysit her sometimes here at the pub. Her mom's a nurse, works a lot. And Brian's job takes him on the road. Oh hey, I've got some pics on my phone if you...
He sniffed a laugh and set the clothes he was carrying onto an empty chair.
Am I talking too much?
Dermot's wide mouth curled into a soft smile. He shook his head, then pointed again at the wedding picture and the other members of the Fitz family.
Well, Mom died in 2005, aneurysm. And Dad faded pretty fast after that. Yeah, tough year. But Jenny's doing good. Married a nice lass. They live in California, wine country. Keep asking me to visit, but the pub keeps busy, and there's Gracie.
Dermit waited for more. He liked hearing about it. A family. A real family. But Fitz went silent, his expression troubled.
Derm,
he finally said.
Why did you break out of All Saints? Why tonight, after all these years? And why with these two? What's going on, man?
Dermit looked over his shoulder at Nicky snoring on the bench, then sighed. As he conveyed his story to Fitz, in squints, scowls, and grunts, the barkeep became more and more troubled.
Wait, are you telling me that for the past 25 years you've been looking after the Christmas cannibal? And that now you've, what, joined forces with the Sundown Slasher in order to get that Nicky Scarpinato out of prison? All because you think the nurses were poisoning him? Dermit, buddy. The old man is, Jesus, Derm. He killed and ate children.
Dermit scowled.
No, I'm not saying he deserves to be put down. And obviously, he's not right in the head. But that's my point. You can't just let him out. And you can't watch him 24/7. If anything happens...
Dermit growled. Fitz exhaled and rubbed the bridge of his nose.
Look, that big old heart of yours is in the right place, but... what a mess. And you're bleeding from a dozen different wounds, by the way.
He held up his first aid kit.
Want me to start with you?
Dermit shook his head.
Aren't you in pain?
Dermit closed his eyes.
Yes.
Fitz sighed.
Guess I'll work on Wraith first. Kid's lost a lot of blood.
He clapped Dermit on the arm, then turned and left him there, staring at the wall of pictures. All those little windows to the past, each image, a wellspring of fresh heartache, sorrow, and shame. Over by the highway, Police Lieutenant Harlan Slager climbed from the driver's seat of his sleek, black muscle car and knelt in the snow. Sucking on a vape pen, he looked up at the silhouette of All Saints Prison beyond the forest, then down, squinting at the tire marks that ran from the tree line and up the embankment onto the highway. Fresh snow was covering them fast, and soon they'd be gone altogether. Slager had to act fast if he wanted to locate the fugitives before anyone else. The feds had fancier toys to do that than the Grim Bay Police Department, but Harlan Slager was a hunter, and tonight he was on the prowl.
Any thoughts, Lieutenant?
Asked a cop over his shoulder. A lady cop, a concept Slager didn't approve of, and new on the force. He blew a cloud of blue raspberry menthol vapor into the night air, then stood. Slager's high and tight military haircut, like his handlebar mustache, was waxed and combed stiff. Not even in the blustery wind could move one hair from its place.
We got any footage from these traffic cams?
No, sir. Sorry. When the power was cut to the prison, it took these out too.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Slager sucked on the vape. His gaze drifted up to the nearest exit sign. He grinned. Turning, he nodded down the empty highway.
Obviously, the fugitives have fled the city,
he said.
They're speeding north as we speak, probably hoping to make it to Canada. Get on the horn with the state troopers, have them shut down the highway, and check every vehicle, thoroughly.
The newbie cop shifted on her feet.
Of course, sir, but shouldn't we also look elsewhere?
Slager turned his dark eyes on her.
The fuck you say to me?
She shivered and began to walk away.
Nothing, sir. Just, I'll make the call. Right away.
The lieutenant watched her hurry away, slipping in the snow. An undercover cop car rolled slowly toward him. The driver rolled down his window and blipped the siren.
Howdy, boss,
he called out, sipping on a paper cup of coffee behind the wheel.
Evening, Deputy Skillet,
said Slager, his eyes still on the female newbie.
Crazy all night,
said Skillet.
Is it true about the massacre in All Saints? About our guys?
The lieutenant nodded.
Damn. And the ones responsible? Got any leads?
Slager pointed with his vape pen at the exit sign.
Little Dublin? What makes you think they went that way? Just a hunch. Ha! Everybody knows Harlan Slager's hunch has got more truth to him than most men's facts.
Laughed Skillet, down on the last of his coffee and tossing the empty cup out the car window.
Want me to check it out then?
Slager nodded.
If I find them 3, do I call it in or?
Slager turned to him.
You call me. Right. Sure thing, Lieutenant.
Deputy Skillet set his right hand across his chest and tapped his palm against his collarbone. Slager returned this secret salute, then clamped his teeth upon the vape pen as he took in another lungful of the sugary sweet poison. He had visited the prison himself and gone into the stinking hallways below the St. Mark's wing. He had seen the bodies of his criminal fraternity brethren in their prison jumpsuits. They hadn't just been killed. They had been butchered, sliced into pieces by a blade wielded by a practiced hand, an expert killer, someone who, before the night was over, would meet their match in Harlan Slager. Jasper winced as Fitz applied the alcohol pad to his wounded left arm.
When did you say you got shot?
Asked the barkeep, seated on the stool beside him.
Tonight,
Jasper answered through gritted teeth.
Couple hours ago. Well then, how the hell is this already puckered and healing?
Jasper leaned his head back, exhaling. He had stripped off his blood-soaked jumpsuit. The pub was chilly, but the cold felt good on his bruised ribs and spine.
In the prison,
he finally said, as the barkeep wrapped his arm in gauze.
A doctor has been giving me an experimental serum of augmented stem cells that can regenerate damaged tissues.
Good Lord. Of course they did,
said Fitz, rolling his eyes.
Sure you don't want something for the pain?
Jasper shook his head.
All right then. And here, I got you some clothes. They're my son's, but he's not as tall as you. They'll fit a lot better than Dermot's, though.
He glanced over at where the huge man sat beside the sleeping Nicky. Dermit had changed into sweatpants that reached to his calves and a bathrobe stretched to its limit over his wide back. Sniffing a laugh, Fitz set a pair of old khakis and a Grim Bay Hammerhead sweatshirt on the bar in front of Jasper.
Oh, and one other thing.
Jasper checked the offered clothes for any itchy tags, which irritated him to no end, then pulled on the garments while Fitz walked around the bar and started rummaging through the cabinets. After a minute, the barkeep set out a single-packaged pudding cup on a plate, then stabbed a used birthday candle into its foil top. The candle was pink and shaped like a half-melted number 3. Jasper stared down at the plate suspiciously as Fitz pulled out a lighter and lit the candle.
Ta-da!
He pushed the plate across the bar. Jasper narrowed his eyes.
What is this?
Fitz crossed his arms.
What is it? It's a birthday cake, obviously. Or the best I could do on short notice.
When Jasper said nothing, the barkeep leaned forward.
It is after midnight, Mr. Wraith. So, it is December 20th. Second shortest day of the year, and, if your Wikipedia page is right, your birthday. It's the big 3-0 for you, right?
Jasper blinked and glared down at the flickering candle.
I have a Wikipedia page.
Reaching out his right hand, he pinched the fiery wick between his thumb and forefinger.
No, you're supposed to make a wish and blow, and nah, it don't matter.
He plucked out the candle, tore off the pudding's foil wrapping, and set a spoon beside the plate.
Bon appetit.
On my Wikipedia page,
said Jasper, still staring at the plate.
What does it say about my family?
Don't remember. I'm just good with dates.
Jasper's gaze snapped up to the barkeep's face, and the Christmas lights twinkled in the killer's eyes, like oily drops of paint on a black pool. He leaned in.
And do you believe, young Mr. Fitz, that by lighting a candle and giving me pudding, you actually increase the likelihood that you will survive this night?
Fitz stared back, unfazed.
Is your plan to cut my throat with the paring knife you took from my cutting board and slipped into your pants pocket?
Jasper's eyelids twitched, and his upper lip curled.
Ain't my first time being threatened. As for my chances of making it through tonight, I'd say they're at 50-50.
He grabbed up the first aid kit.
Your turn, Derm,
he called. He walked around the bar, but stopped, sighed, and turned back to the young man slouched on the stool.
You want to know why I lit a candle on a pudding cup for you, Jasper? It's because I've known many a killer in my time. I've had to pull the trigger myself when there was no other option. And you know the thing that they've all had in common.
Jasper said nothing.
Deep down, they're all just scared little boys, like the rest of us.
Jasper swallowed.
I'm not. Suit yourself. But I still wouldn't let that pudding go to waste. It's butterscotch.
With a wink, Fitz walked off to tend to Dermot's wounds, and Jasper was left alone at the bar. He picked up the spoon, dipped it slowly into the pudding, and tasted it. It was too sweet. But it was also the first birthday treat that anyone had ever given to him in his 30 years of life. When the bells over at St. Halvard's rang 5 times to mark the morning hour, Fitz blinked drowsily and finished texting his final message to a colleague over at the docks. Thank God for the early hours of longshoremen. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come up with a plan in time. Not that it would be easy to pull this off, with or without assistance. Stowing his phone in his back pocket, he walked back downstairs and into the pub. Jasper was now the one napping on a bench by the windows. Nicky Scarpinato was awake and sitting on the floor beneath the table, giggling like some demented child. The old maniac's eyes glinted in the shadows, like a cat's eyes. And Dermit? Dermit was slumped forward in a chair beside Nicky's table, chin in his hands, head bobbing as he tried to stay awake. Fitz moved behind the bar, grabbing a Tupperware container of soup from the mini fridge and popped it into the microwave. As the soup heated up, Fitz pushed his glasses up his nose and whistled a quick note. Dermit looked back. Fitz cocked his head to indicate he should come over. Rising with a groan, Dermit walked over to the bar, scratching at one shoulder, where the itchy bathrobe was stretched thin over his bulging, bruised muscles.
"You still hanging in there?"
asked Fitz quietly. Dermit nodded.
"Good, 'cause I've just made some arrangements."
The microwave beeped. Fitz retrieved the soup and poured it into a thermos while he spoke, low and fast.
"I got a hold of Cara Keeling at the docks. She's got a slow boat about to ship off to Galway. They were gonna leave Christmas Eve, but I've just convinced her to send it off at first light instead, since this mess with the prison break will make for a lot of chaos in the days to come."
He set the thermos on the bar and set a banana beside it.
"There'll be a storage container on that ship, waiting for you. It's nothing comfy, I'm afraid, but it'll have food, water, and a bucket with a lid, just enough to get to Ireland."
Dermot's brow furrowed.
"And by the time you arrive, I'll have set something up for you. Work in the countryside, probably. Somewhere safe where you can hide and..."
No.
Fitz flinched and sucked in a breath.
"Derm, you can't stay here, and you can't take him with you."
Fitz turned to watch the little figure of the cannibal under the table, who was now gazing up at the Christmas lights above the bar and licking his lips. Dermot's whole face screwed up, tangled emotions playing out in his deep wrinkles.
"Listen to me,"
said Fritz, but then he went quiet, trying to think how best to word his appeal. Fitz thought he could guess the way Dermit saw things, even if Dermit couldn't. If someone like Nicky Scarpinato could be proven worthy of love and of care, then maybe Dermit too was not beyond hope. Was that it?
"Derm, what you've done for your cellmate all these years, it's beautiful, and it gave you purpose too. But that fella under the table is very old and very ill and very dangerous. He's not your responsibility, and you owe it to yourself to get out, to start over. You're not like them, Derm. You never were. Twisted Trinity, my ass."
Dermit hung his head, face twitching with indecision. Fitz leaned back.
"You got about an hour, and then Dock 17. They'll be expecting you."
Scooping up the thermos, banana, and a water bottle, Fitz turned to walk out from around the bar, but found himself face to face with Jasper David Wraith.
"Jesus!"
Fitz panted, coming to a sudden stop.
"About gave me a heart attack. Where are you going?"
asked Jasper, looking down at the things that the barkeep was holding.
"To the getaway car you parked in my alley. Or did it not occur to you that the man you tied up in the trunk might be peckish, not to mention cold?"
He tried to march forward again, but Jasper stood his ground.
"I told you, the driver is none of your concern."
Fitz sighed.
"Well, Dermit told me that your driver is older and looked unwell last night. So, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to check on him."
Jasper did step aside this time, but added,
"Then I'm going with you."
At this, Dermit released a snarling growl and marched over. There wasn't a chance in hell that he'd let Fitz out of his sight with the sundown slasher for a companion. Fitz might have been touched if he wasn't feeling so stressed.
"Well, we can't all go out,"
he said.
"And we can't risk Scarpinato there sneaking out either, so..."
Fitz looked at Jasper, whose right hand hovered just outside the pocket of his khakis. Then he looked over at Dermit, who squeezed one giant hand into a giant fist, knuckles cracking.
"Cool yourselves, boys,"
said Fitz.
"We're all tired and antsy, but it ain't worth killing each other over this."
Despite his warning, neither the slasher nor the smasher backed down for another long moment. Then Dermit sighed and turned around. He knelt on the ground beside Nikki's table and pointed his 12-inch index finger in warning.
Stay.
Under the table, the giggling stopped abruptly, and Nikki nodded. Fitz shook his head, grumbling to himself. But he grabbed a blanket from the bench, then reached behind the bar. Snatching his old newsboy cap from where it hung on the mounted fire extinguisher, he pulled it on. They closed the pub door tight behind them, and Dermit shoved a board across the frame to keep it from being opened from the inside. Then Fitz turned and led the way toward the alley. The pre-dawn weather was frigid, and the street was empty, except for the swirling of snowflakes and the sound of wind and the bay lapping against the embankment across the road. Feet crunching into the snow, they walked around the corner into the alley and approached the black car parked there. Already, the car's roof and trunk were buried in a few inches of white, and sticks and clumps of frozen mud stuck out from the wheel wells, remnants of their recent escape from the prison grounds and through the woods to the highway. Handing the little meal he had brought to Dermit, Fitz took the car keys from Jasper, activated the flashlight feature on his phone, and leaned down to unlock the trunk.
Keep your eyes peeled for trouble,
he said. Jasper crossed his arms and glowered, but he turned to look up and down the alley. It took Fitz a moment to get the icy lock turned. Then he slowly opened the trunk, careful not to let too much snow fall into it.
Hello there,
he said softly to the man curled up inside.
Your name's Charlie, right? Hey, you awake there, Charles?
The man, who was black with short white hair and dressed in a suit and tie, was on his side, facing away from them, with bungee cords wrapped tightly around his ankles, chest, and arms. Fitz shook the man by the shoulder. Nothing. Leaning further inside, he turned the body onto its back and held up his phone's light at the face, which had duct tape over the mouth. The eyes were half open, pupils dilated, every muscle was rigid, and the skin was bluish gray. Fitz exhaled.
Damn.
He checked for a pulse at the neck, just to be sure, then leaned out again. Dermit was watching him expectantly, and when Fitz looked up and shook his head, Dermot's eyes went wide. Fitz looked over at Jasper, but he was staring down at the far end of the alley, where a car with its headlights dimmed had just pulled into view.
Mr. Wraith,
said Fitz.
I'm sorry to tell you that your driver is dead.
Jasper blinked. He turned his head to Fitz.
What? Charlie, he's dead. Has been for at least an hour. Cardiac arrest, probably. Of course, I can't be sure.
Jasper shook his head.
What are you? No.
He turned to the trunk and leaned inside to check for himself. Fitz backed up beside Dermit, watching as Jasper poked the body, then shook it softly, then shook violently.
He's gone. Impossible. Here.
Fitz held up his phone.
Look closer if you don't believe. No!
Jasper brought back a fist, then drove it down into the trunk. There was a thud of his punch against the corpse and a crack of bone.
Hey now, none of that,
said Fitz. But Jasper spun around and smacked the phone from his hand.
He cannot be dead!
Fitz cursed, watching as his phone fell into the snow at their feet. Beside him, Dermit growled at Jasper.
He can't have died!
Jasper screamed, even louder this time.
Because I told her he was okay! I told her! Quiet down, Jasper. She said that she and I, that we had a chance of, but only if Charlie was okay. And she'll think I did it. She'll blame me. She'll blame me, but I didn't do it. I didn't do this. He was alive. Quiet down. This can't be how it ends. This can't be.
From the road at the end of the alley, through the tinted glass of his driver's side window, a police officer watched as the three figures in the shadows argued beside the parked getaway car. Grinning, Officer Skillet brought his phone up to his ear.
Hey, Lieutenant, guess what I found? Yep, I got him in my sights right now. The Twisted Trinity and the Unholy Flesh. By the time the sun is up, we will have our vengeance. Round up the boys and get them all down here. We've got us some skinning to do.
Valentine's Day is almost here, and NoSleep Coffee has the perfect way to share the love. For a limited time, buy one 12-ounce bag and get one free with promo code VDayBOGO at NoSleepCoffee.com, making it easy to gift a bag while keeping one for yourself. Unlike store-bought coffee roasted months ago and left on the shelves, No Sleep coffee is roasted to order and shipped out right away for maximum freshness, delivering a richer aroma, bolder flavor, and a smooth finish you just won't get from store-bought coffee. This Valentine's Day special ends February 13th, so don't wait. Visit NoSleepCoffee.com and use promo code VDayBOGO at checkout to get your free 12-ounce bag of No Sleep coffee today. Mandy Fitz had only gotten back from an extended 16-hour shift in the ER a few hours earlier, when the hospital called her. She could hear the panic in the nurse's voice. It seemed that just as the injuries from the stadium riot were slowing, wounded prisoners from over at All Saints were being brought in by the truckload. It was all hands on deck.
Yeah, okay. Heading out now. I just got to drop off Gracie first. No, I'll be still out of town, yeah. I'll be there as soon as I can.
Pulling on a fresh set of scrubs and her winter coat, Mandy reluctantly scooped up her 3-year-old daughter from the bed.
Santa?
Asked Gracie, rubbing her sleepy eyes.
No, baby, just Mommy. We still got a few more days until Christmas.
Gracie blinked and looked out the apartment window as her mom pulled her arms into her coat sleeves.
It's wheelie dog. I know. You can sleep more in your car seat, okay? But Mommy's got to go back to work. Again. I go in daycare? No, baby. I'm taking you to Grandpa's. Ooh, I love the pub.
Carrying her daughter against her chest, Mandy walked down the icy apartment steps to their minivan. Her father-in-law was always happy to watch Gracie, but it wasn't like him to ignore her texts. But Mandy figured he probably just had his phone on Do Not Disturb for the night. What else would the old barkeep be up to at 5:30 on a blustery winter morning? Young Fitz had never felt older. He was trying his best to keep the pair of infamous killers beside him, Fitz's old friend Dermit McMurrough and serial killer Jasper David Wraith, from tearing each other apart in their fury and fear, while also hoping to get through the night all in one piece himself and avoid federal prison if he could help it. They had just driven the getaway car through the snowy alleys of Little Dublin, over to the boarded-up shops behind the cathedral, and deposited the vehicle in the garage of a former auto repair shop. The suited corpse was still in the car's trunk, which made Fitz sick to his stomach. But at least it would take the authorities longer to track it down off the street.
One big fucking headache at a time,
he said, pocketing the car's keys and putting back on his hat.
That's all we can do for poor Mr. Charlie for the time being. Now we three gotta hurry back to the pub before anyone spots us. The sun will rise in less than an hour.
Neither fugitive responded. Jasper was still too shocked about the driver's death to speak, and Dermit looked torn between anger at Jasper for causing the death or anger at himself for contributing to the situation. Fitz tried to catch Dermot's eye, to remind his friend that the real urgency was getting him to the docks in time to stow away on a departing cargo ship. But Dermot's shoulders were slumped, his bearded face downcast. Fitz sighed and pulled his phone from his pocket. Jasper had knocked it into the snow earlier. The screen was cracked, and the whole thing was wet and cold. He clicked the side buttons. Nothing.
Damn it. All right, follow me and try not to look suspicious.
This last request might as well have been a joke. Fitz himself was nothing special. A typical Celtic man in his mid-50s, with glasses, a gray mustache, and a beer belly that came with his profession. But Jasper David Wraith was the stuff of nightmares. Tall and gaunt, with wiry muscles, both old and new scars on his face and hands, and dark eyes like a shark. Never mind that he dressed in some of Fitz's son's old clothes, a sweatshirt and khaki pants. The face of the sundown slasher was known to all in the city. And Dermot Smasher McMurrough, the assassin who had taken down a criminal cartel one busted skull at a time back in the 90s? Well, he was almost 9 feet tall now. Taller even than when he and Fitz worked together in their youth. His primal features, ginger hair and beard, and giant hands were hard to miss. He was wearing a disguise too, sweatpants and a bathrobe, though the fabric of each was stretched to its limits, trying to fit his muscled limbs and torso. He looked ridiculous. Grateful for the cover of night and the blinding snow, Fitz pulled open the back door of the auto shop and stepped inside. The icy wind burned his cheeks. He had only taken 2 steps, the others close behind him, when Dermit seized the back of his coat. Fitz lurched to a stop, squinting through the snow in the air. By the flicker of the streetlights, he saw them. 3 cars were parked in the street ahead, with half a dozen silhouettes standing behind them, guns drawn, police badges glinting at their chests. Fitz looked left, then right, and saw more cars and cops on either side. Fitz sighed.
Well, fellas, he said over his shoulder, it seems, as my people would say, that the proverbial jig is up.
Jasper ignored this and marched forward, weaving around Fitz and coming to a stop in the center of the road, his hands clenched into fists at his side, his baggy borrowed sweatshirt blowing in the wind. The crazy bastard was going to try to fight, which meant the cops would open fire, which meant Fitz and Dermit were about to be pumped full of lead. Fitz began to raise his hands in surrender, but found himself suddenly lifted off the ground and tugged backward in Dermit's grip. Half a second later, he was set on his feet inside the garage again, and heard Dermit shove the door shut, leaving Jasper stranded outside. Fitz raised an eyebrow.
Thanks,
he said, a little breathlessly, dusting himself off. Dermit began to rush around the garage, searching for another way out.
But the fact that they let that happen just means they're hoping to take us alive. They'll have surrounded the whole block, Derm. Our only hope is to turn ourselves in.
Dermit ignored him and moved faster, and bent forward to fit under the low ceiling. Coming upon a boarded-up doorway with rusty engine parts stacked around it, Dermit began to scoop away the junk and the boards with his giant hands. In his coat pocket, Fitz felt his phone vibrate. Out of habit, he pulled it out. The screen was flickering on and off, the image skewed by the cracks in the glass, but it was working again, and he had messages waiting for him. Lots of them. He tapped at the screen, trying to get the texts to load. In the street outside, Jasper stood very still, like a predatory beast, his muscles taut, his gaze panning the enemies before him.
So you're the famous JDW,
shouted one of the cops, taking cover behind his car.
the psycho killer who brings a knife to a gunfight and somehow lives to tell the tale. You know, my wife has a sorta crush on you.
Some of the other cops laughed.
I don't get it. I think you're an ugly son of a bitch. You agree, boys? Damn right, Skillet,
called a cop to the left. Jasper ignored their jeering and the sounds of banging around in the garage behind him. None of that mattered. The next few seconds, his manner of attack, the fight, that's all he had to worry about. He could feel the kitchen knife in his right pocket, 4.5-inch stainless steel blade. He could work with that. But the handle was made of cheap plastic, and the tang would be short and narrow, liable to break. He'd have to keep that in mind.
It's pretty funny. Your fellow Twisted leaving you behind out here. Poor baby. Probably the last picked in gym class too, eh, Jasper? We'll deal with the other two, but you're the main attraction anyway.
The man grinned.
And you're lucky. Ordinarily, we'd strip you down right here, right now, and skin you alive. It is our way. But with all this hullabaloo going on, you'll be worth more alive to the right buyer. But just remember who it was that caught you.
The idiot cop took one hand off his service weapon, reached to his collar, and pulled his shirt down into the side over his collarbone.
Recognize it?
Jasper narrowed his eyes, then shrugged.
It's a tattoo, dumbass! A deer skull and antlers. The same tattoo that was on 12 of your fellow inmates in All Saints, men who you sliced apart during your escape.
That's plausible.
I killed many fools last night.
The cop scowled.
You messed with the wrong gang, buddy. You messed with the mighty Venice sinners.
The policeman cheered. Jasper cocked his head.
The what?
The Venice sinners. The gang.
Your gang is called the Veni Sinners? As in venison plus sinners? That's a terrible name.
Shut up.
That's the worst name I've ever heard of.
Sneering, the cop started to march around his car toward Jasper, but stopped at the sound of another vehicle approaching up the road. A car with a distinctive, throaty rumble from its engine. As Jasper listened, the engine powered off, a car door slammed, and a pair of heavy feet crunched through the snow, coming toward them. The cops all snapped to attention, clapping their hands over their collarbones and bowing as a tall police officer sauntered from the whiteout. Jasper tensed, sliding the toe of one shoe back and over as he pivoted his body to face this new arrival, who, like him, had an air of the predatory power about him. The officer marched right up to Jasper and stopped. They were the same height, and as Jasper glared into his eyes, the man lifted a vape pen to his mouth, sucked, and exhaled into Jasper's face. Jasper winced. The aerosol smelled like chemical fruit and farts.
So,
The officer growled, looking Jasper up and down.
you are the sun-down slasher.
Hell of a thing you pulled off at All Saints. That level of carnage was... looked to be a battle worthy of Grim Bay. And congratulations on your escape.
He raised his vape again, in his left hand, and Jasper's gaze darted down to the cop's belt, where his right hand lay atop his holstered pistol.
My name is Lieutenant Harlan Slager.
More of the sickly sweet smoke came out with his words and mixed in the snow in the air.
Slager is originally a Dutch name, you know, and it means butcher. I thought you might find that interesting.
Jasper did not react. In his pocket, the knife now seemed to grow fiery hot. It took all his will not to pull it out now and slash open this asshole's neck. But then, the last thing he'd see was the awful vapor rising from Harlan Slager's severed throat, before the dozen gunmen took Jasper out.
No doubt you can tell by my accent that I am a transport to this fine city.
Slager went on.
I am also, however, a student of its history.
To Jasper's astonishment and confusion, the officer stepped back, removed his right hand from his holster, and began to pull off his jacket.
Do you know the forgotten story of this city slasher? These streets here, they are far older than is often remembered, and their bedrock is far more saturated with the blood of glorious battle than is written in any textbook.
Slager folded his jacket and set it on the snowy roof of the nearest car. His men cast curious looks at one another as their commanding officer loosened and pulled off his necktie next, then began to unbutton his shirt.
Grim Bay was founded by Vikings, long before Cristobal Columbus ever found his Italian in the New World. And the Vikings that came to this place, now they were warriors, merciless and proud. And upon the rocky shores of this bay, they did wage mighty battle against the Algonquian braves.
As Slager pulled off his shirt and set it onto his folded coat, Jasper took note of the many tattoos and scars on his body. Slager had the matching deer skull on his upper left chest, but also a military insignia on his right shoulder, a blood type inked on his wrist, and more tattoos too faded to make out. There were dog tags strung around his neck, and lattice-pattern electrical burn scars all up and down his ribs. As he turned to face Jasper straight on, he unclasped his utility belt, pistol and all, and let them fall into the snow at his feet. A few of the cops behind the cars looked nervous, but not Slager. He grinned.
What you and I are about to do, it is like the holy ritual of Grim Bay.
Do you understand? Violence in its purest form.
Jasper blinked to shake out the snowflakes gathering in his eyelashes. He bent his knees ever so slightly and wiggled his fingers, ready to grab for his weapon.
A cycle of vengeance, repeating like the seasons. And time again it comes down to this. The lone wolf killer.
Slager's eyes flashed at Jasper.
And the horde that seek to strike him down.
He took one last hit on his vape.
Weapons away, gents!
He called out.
I want this to be a fair fight. Butcher to butcher.
The other officers reluctantly lowered their guns as Slager twisted to toss his vape pen next to his clothes. And at that moment, a wicked wind arose, sharp and shrill, and sweeping up a cloud of snow in front of the streetlights, so that for one tiny instant, they were cloaked in darkness. Jasper lunged, kicking up snow onto Slager's bare back as he pulled out the knife and swung. Then the light was back, and the cop had spun to meet the attack, snatching Jasper's wrist in one fist and punching with the other. Jasper ducked to dodge the blow, dropped his knife from his seized right hand, caught it in his left, and stabbed. Slager released Jasper's wrist and lurched backward. The blade whistled, but only grazed his chest.
Cheater!
Shouted a cop to Jasper's right. The sundown slasher moved by instinct, bending sharply backward at the waist, and he felt the whoosh of a bullet pass inches before his face. A cop to his left let out a grunt and fell into the snow.
Watch your crossfire, you morons!
Barked Slager.
And I told you, this bastard is mine, blade or not.
Jasper leaned upright again. His fist tightened around the shitty plastic handle of his weapon. He stared into Harlan Slager's eyes, determined not to let this man, or any of them, sense just how much he was struggling internally. Jasper had never felt such fatigue at the start of a fight. It was like a heavy blanket on his shoulders pulling him down. The muscles in his left arm were fiery hot with pain, while the rest of him shivered in the wintry storm. His overall energy was so low, and the butterscotch pudding churning in his stomach wouldn't be enough to fuel him for an extended battle. He had to be quick, to be efficient, to outsmart this hillbilly historian and dispatch the others one by one. Jasper exhaled, relaxed his face, and held out his right arm, the knife sideways in his grip. Through the snow, Slager watched him, one thumb tracing the fresh cut on his abs. Jasper slowly opened his hand, one finger at a time.
Fair fight.
He breathed in through his nose, inflating his lungs, letting the chill in his lungs bring him focus, bring him control, bring him power. Jasper released the knife. It dropped, handle first. Eyes on Slager. Jasper brought up his right foot with a blur of speed and precision, kicking the knife straight at the policeman's face. But Slager was fast too, jerking up his right hand to shield himself. The blade sunk through his palm and out the back of the hand. And before he could do anything besides grimace, Jasper was flying into him, hammering down with his right elbow to jam the knife into Slager's face. It sunk through skin and bone, just above his mustache on the left side, and pierced down through the roof of his mouth.
Ah!
Hand pinned to his own face, Slager fell backward into the snow.
Kill this slash-tard!
He spluttered, blood filling his mouth. Jasper drove, the air around him splitting with the roar of gunfire. He twisted to land on his back in a slide, grabbed the fender of the nearest car, and yanked himself under it. Spinning on the icy ground, he emerged between the wheels, just at the boots of another officer. The cop moved to aim down at Jasper, but he wasn't fast enough. Jasper snatched his gun by the barrel and forced it upward. It fired, shooting the leg of the next cop. Pulling himself out from under the car, Jasper smashed the gunman's head into the driver's side window. As the body slumped to the ground and more shots rang out, Jasper seized 2 long shards of broken glass from the car window, snapped them free. Gritting his teeth at the pain in his palms, he spun, charged at the next assailant, and raising his sparkling blades over his head, he slashed. While the sound of the battle raged in the street outside, back in the dim garage, Dermit finally got to the obstructed door and kicked it open. Grimacing at the pain this caused his right knee, he turned back to Fitz, but his friend wasn't moving. Fitz was staring down at the phone in his hand, his eyes wide. Fitz blinked and looked up.
It's Mandy, my daughter-in-law. She messaged 20 minutes ago. She said,
He swallowed.
she's got to go into work early, and that she's bringing Gracie over. She's bringing my granddaughter to the pub.
Dermit froze.
Oh God, Derm, he's in there.
All the color drained from Fitz's face.
Nikki!
For an instant, they stood rooted in their dread. Then Dermit spun, tripping over rusted scrap, and charged into the dark hallway beyond the door, barreling into a dusty, abandoned apartment next door. He ran blindly forward, his hulking shoulders slamming against cabinets and door frames, ripping the fabric of his sleeves and cutting at his skin. Turning a corner, his forehead smashed against a chandelier so that dust rained down around him. Snarling, Dermit stumbled in a circle, trying to ignore the stars in his vision and the way his whole spine was starting to seize up. He spotted a boarded-up doorway and stampeded through it. In a dingy living room on the other side, an old woman had been sleeping on an armchair and awoke with a gasp as the dusty giant in a torn bathrobe burst through her wall. A little dog in her lap started barking madly. Dermit swung his head to search for an exit and spotted a window across the room. Snow falling onto the main street outside, he charged through the living room and leapt, driving his shoulder against the window. Dermit's landing in the street was rough. He stumbled and slipped, glass and bits of wood and icy snow raining down around him, and felt a lightning bolt of pain shoot up his left ankle and into the back of his leg. Grunting, he tried to run again, but his leg wouldn't take the weight, and he fell to one knee.
Hey! Oh shit!
Screamed a man's voice. Dermit looked up, panting, as a cop outside his parked police car threw down a cigarette and whipped out his pistol. Squeezing his hands into fists, Dermit grit his teeth and pushed off from the ground, leaping at the cop. The pistol came up, but Dermit's fist was faster. His backhand sent the cop reeling sideways into his car, denting in the door. The body slumped into the snow. Dermit took another step, and another. Swinging his ape-like arms, he broke into a limping jog, breath hissing through his clamped jaws as he pushed through his pain, speeding up, racing through the neighborhood of his youth. He had to go faster. He had to make it. He had to. Mandy parked out front of the pub and left the minivan running as she lifted Gracie from her car seat.
Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Gracie was now very much awake and excited by the snowflakes in the air. The first glow of dawn was turning the world silvery blue, and in the child's eyes, it really was a winter wonderland. Mandy carried her to the front door and was about to go for the spare key in her pocket when she noticed the broken handle and the plank of wood shoved in front of the door.
What in the world?
She shoved the board free and pushed the door open.
Pops? What happened here? Did somebody try to break in, or?
Mandy stepped inside, shivering, and pulled the door closed the best she could. The place was dark, except for the Christmas lights over the bar. The stools and some of the tables had been shifted, and a pair of grungy orange garments lay heaped in a corner.
Pops?
She called out, setting Gracie on her feet and taking hold of her hand.
Did you see my texts?
There was no answer. Mandy started toward the back hall, but Gracie tugged on her hand.
Gracie, come on, we gotta... Shh!
Gracie insisted, hopping up and down on her feet excitedly.
He's here with Mommy.
What? Fanta! Fanta's in the pub! He!
Mandy felt a chill run down her back.
Mommy doesn't have time for this, baby. But he's right there! Behind you!
Mandy sighed and turned around.
Gracie, we really can't...
Gracie winced as her mother released her hand and slumped to the floor. The girl's eyes welled with tears. She didn't understand.
Fanta?
From the shadows, red beady eyes stared at her. Then the short, fat man crept forward, dropping something heavy onto the floor. Gracie took a step backward. The man giggled and hopped over her mother's body. Gracie's bottom lip trembled. The Christmas lights that Gracie had helped Grandpa hang up reflected on the old man's bald head and in his unblinking eyes. Green, orange, red.
Fanta?
Nikolai Scarpinato licked his lips and raised his gnarled, wrinkled hands as he approached the child. Drool dribbled from his mouth into his beard.
Oh!
He reached out, yellow fingernails scraping up her winter coat.
Oh!
He seized his hands around her neck.
Oh!
And squeezed. Dermot's right hand seized both of Nikki's wrists and jerked the man backward as his left hand reached around Gracie and lifted her up. He turned in place, cradling the child against his heaving chest and blocking her view of the demented cannibal and of her mother on the floor beside the fire extinguisher with her blood dripping off its lower rim. For a moment, Gracie was stiff and wide-eyed in his arms. Then she released a trembling cry and started to wriggle and kick. Dermit didn't let her go. He held her tight, his cheek against her curly hair, tears streaming down his face. She was safe. He had gotten there in time. She was safe. She was safe! He choked on a sob, his whole body shaking. Through the front door, which Dermit had smashed to pieces as he entered, footsteps sounded. Fitz ran into view, clutching a stitch at his side, his hat gone, his pale face glistening with sweat. He stood in the doorway, wheezing. Through his lopsided glasses, he stared at Dermit and the child in his arms.
Is she?
Dermit looked over at him, and so did Gracie.
Grandpa!
Dermit exhaled and bent to set the girl down. She ran across the room and into Fitz's waiting arms.
Oh, sweetheart!
He sighed, clutching her to him.
Oh, thank you.
I no white Santa. I no want him come Christmas. He hurt Mommy.
Fitz gasped and looked around the pub.
Oh, Christ! Mandy!
Dermit watched as Fitz carried his granddaughter and rushed to check the woman on the floor.
She's breathing. I gotta call an ambulance.
He looked up at Dermit.
I gotta call right now.
Dermit nodded, swooning on his feet. He reached out a hand at the bar to steady himself as the pub seemed to spin in his dizzied vision. Swallowing thickly, Dermit looked around. For Nikki. His elderly cellmate had scurried over to hide under a table in the corner. Dermit could see his eyes glinting there, and he could hear him, whimpering softly, like a dog caught being naughty, ashamed but also annoyed at having a treat taken away before it could bite and chew.
I need an ambulance!
Fitz yelled into his phone.
The Ballygood Pub on Wharf Street. Little Dublin, yeah, hurry!
He lowered the phone. Dermit turned and met his eyes.
You still have time?
Dermit glanced out the window. The morning was hazy, and through the snow, the surface of the bay shone like an antique silver mirror.
Promise me, you'll make it.
Dermit breathed in and breathed out. He nodded. Straightening up, he looked down at his body. The sweatpants were ripped and wet, and the bathrobe was little more than threads. He stumbled over to the bench by the window, grabbed a blanket, and tossed it over one shoulder. Then, moving back to Nikki's table, Dermit bent forward and gestured wearily for the man to come out. Nikki giggled. Then he crawled out from the side and tried to scurry off behind the bar. Dermit reached out and caught him by the arm.
No.
Nikki pouted, but allowed himself to be picked up and held against Dermot's chest, like little Gracie had been. Dermit limped toward the door, wincing with each heavy step. Before going outside, he looked back at young Fitz, but his old friend was busy, taking care of the ones he loved. Dermit held Nikki. He didn't want to do it in front of the pub, so he limped down the road, the bay on their right, the brick houses and shops on their left. Some of those houses were boarded up, but others had wreaths on the doors, icicle lights on the roof. One even had a Christmas tree shining brightly in the front window, with twinkling lights and balls and ornaments of every shape and color. Nikki got excited when he saw that, so Dermit halted and turned to let his cellmate look at all the pretty colors. Nikki giggled. Dermit adjusted his grip, cradling Nikki's head in one arm, then opened his hand and wrapped his fingers snug around the old man's skull. Dermit closed his eyes and squeezed. Nikolai Giuseppe Scarpinato was 85 years old. He had been born to a prominent Mafia family in 1940. He was doted on by his mother and beaten daily by his father, and abused often by a brother, a cousin, a teacher, and a priest. He witnessed his first murder when he was 8 years old. He committed his first murder at age 10. By the time he was finally caught, he had strangled 28 children and cooked and eaten 15 of them. He had spent the last 50 years behind bars, where he was hated by everyone. He had a recorded IQ of 40. And until he had been transferred to the tower at All Saints Federal Prison and met his new cellmate, he had never had a friend, nor anyone in his life who had known what he was and loved him anyway. Nicky loved Christmas. He loved to cook and to eat, and he loved Dermit, and he felt safe in the giant's arms. Dermit opened his eyes, and releasing a shaky breath, he lowered the headless body of the Christmas cannibal into the snowy street. Still bending low, he scooped up handfuls of the fresh snow from the curb and used it to clean the blood and the brains and the filth from his hands. Then he straightened up, sniffling, and unfolded the blanket on his shoulder. He used 2 fingers to poke a hole in its center, then put his head through the hole and draped the blanket over himself like a poncho. He started forward again, alone now, hugging his arms around his chest. It was very cold. From around the bend of the bay, the horn of a cargo ship blared out. He moved faster. Behind the wintry fog, the sun was rising fast, and Dermit had a ride to catch and a promise to keep. Jasper dropped the glass blades to the ground. He stood up, panting, blood streaming from both his hands onto the snow around his final combatant. Looking around at the empty cars and the bodies strewn on the snowy pavement, he wiped the blood and sweat from his eyes with the back of a sleeve, then walked back to where the battle had started. Lieutenant Harlan Slager still lay on his back where Jasper had left him, now dusted with a centimeter of fresh snow. He was stiff and twitching, and Jasper could hear him breathing in weak, blood-gurgling little gasps. Jasper knelt beside him and reached to check the officer's pants pocket. After a moment, he grinned and held up Slager's car keys in front of his blue-tinted face. Jasper rattled the keys. Slager's eyelids quivered and opened. Jasper leaned in close. "I win." He stood up again, spinning the car keys on one finger, then raised one foot to rest the heel of his shoe on the handle of the knife in Slager's face. Slager moaned wetly. Jasper left him there, bleeding out in the snow, and walked to the parked car just up the road. He let out a low whistle. It was a 1987 Buick GNX, sleek, black, powerful. Jasper pulled himself into the driver's seat, stifling a yawn, then put the keys in the ignition. The engine roared to life like a purring beast. Jasper sighed, his breath coming out as a cloud. Throwing the car into drive, he kicked at the gas. The wheels spun out on the ice for a second. Then the car launched forward, swerving across the icy pavement. Jasper switched into second gear, jerking the wheel to drift around the next corner. He settled back in the leather seat, savoring the feel of the wheel beneath his stinging palms. He'd probably have to ditch the recognizable car and steal another at some point, but it would be hours before the fools looking for him pieced together the chaotic chapter of his story that had taken place in Little Dublin that night, and the role their corrupt compatriot Slager had played in it. He sped from the city, driving through the snow and fog and into the hilly state park north of town. Jasper liked those woods. He used to go out there sometimes when he was younger. They were a good place to practice some killing and to clear his head, and right now, he had a lot of mental clearing to do. The future of the sundown slasher was uncertain, but the present did feel a lot better with the world whooshing by outside, and the vibration of the turbocharged V6 across his skin, like a full body massage. And hey, all in all, as far as birthdays went for Jasper David Wraith, this one, not too shabby. When the shipping container doors were finally opened, the first things Dermit noticed were the smells of sea air and fresh soil and pine trees. He heard the splashing of the waves and the calling of seabirds. His legs were very stiff as he wriggled out and stood, blinking in the sunlight. The sky was blue and the day was brisk. The sea was at his back, a hilly countryside before him. An old man in rubber boots and a thick woolen sweater stood in the grass nearby, smoking a pipe.
So then,
The old man said, chewing the end of his pipe.
you're the cousin I'm taking in, eh? Big lad, that's for sure. Well, I hope you're not expecting any grand nights out, lad. My farm is miles from the nearest village. There's plenty of work that'll need doing. With the animals and that, a bit of gardening. 'Tis a quiet life. Think that'll suit you, son?
Dermit McMurrough inhaled through his nostrils, letting in the fresh air. The corners of his mouth twitched in a soft smile.
Grand. Then, we're off.
The farmer turned and marched down a path through the pines, and Dermit followed, limping over mossy stones and ducking beneath branches as they wound their way up into those green hills. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the story, be sure to follow or subscribe and share the show with a fellow horror fan. I'll see you in the next one.